guys, it's Ted from Ted Lincoln's Fishing Life here with a really late bite of the day recap. I've had technical difficulties with my camera and my computer, I don't know, and my mic got wet, actually got submerged, so it doesn't work anymore, so we're trying it micless, old school. But yeah, this is the bite of the day recap from November and October of 2022. I know it's really late, but I told you guys I was going to put this out here, so here it is. Let's dive into bites number 256 to 270. We're going to start with actually a bite I had to use because I didn't have new footage. This is an older whopper plopper bite, actually filmed on this same lake. I happened to be sitting on a dock filming this intro or this whole recap too. So why don't you check out bite number 156 and then I'll break down what it's all about. There we go. So there you go. Who doesn't love a whopper plopper bite, right? That was on my favorite color and my most, I guess, my favorite size of whopper plopper, and that's the 110 in monkey butt, which is kind of a, I don't know, trout, kind of shad-ish with purple. Purple's good for bass. They seem to like it. I actually don't think they even see the top. It's just kind of a nice ghosty color. And like I said, who doesn't love a whopper plopper bite? Actually, whopper plopper fishing is how me and Atypical Outdoors became buddies. I was asking for some tips when he first started out and I had just bought a batch of whopper ploppers. I actually just had to buy a new one of these. I got lucky and Dick's Sporting Goods at some point had that buy 5 get 5 free on stuff, and they had their entire selection of whopper ploppers in the basket. So the first time I ever bought a whopper plopper, I actually bought 10 whopper ploppers, and I still have most of them. I've lost a couple, and I've added different sizes as they've come out. But even in the other sizes that I like to use, which are usually the really tiny one, the 60, and I think the next bigger one up is the 75, and then they have the 90, but I like the 75 and the 60, but also in this color. It's not the only color I like, but definitely my go-to. And that was actually on my heavy crankbait setup, which actually has a small glide on there, or with swim bait, the Gantrel Junior at the moment. This is a 7.9 crankbait rod, so it's a very moderate rod. I have it with my old 20-year-old Calcutta 100 with a Gomex's handle. I believe I was running 30-pound braid at the time. I have 50 on here now just because I ran out of 30 and I needed to put line on. To a 17-pound mono leader, and I direct tied that day. Usually I'll use a clip, but sometimes I'll direct tie, especially to anything with a prop. The more you can have that line pointed forward, the better. This is a perfect setup for whopper plopper. I mean, it's got the big-ish treble hooks, so treble hook baits, moderate rod. I don't tend to fish the whopper plopper really close to heavy cover, so I don't need the extra fast or the faster action of a rod to pull the whopper plopper out of the weeds. That would be the only reason that my main topwater rod isn't a moderate, it's fast. I like to pull it around or fish it around heavy cover, and having that faster rod helps you pop it off the weeds without having to get stuck. But a crankbait rod or jerkbait rod makes a good topwater rod. I mean, it's basically small treble hooks, or treble hooks in general. 7/9 really helps you make those long casts, and that's awesome with the whopper plopper. That was just old school, reeling it in, retrieve, and you know, what else can I say? We love whopper ploppers, right? And the older reel is this Calcutta is a 5-to-1, and with the whopper plopper, there's kind of a rhythm for every size, and with that 110, this gear ratio is just fine. I usually like a faster gear ratio. I've owned this reel for 20 years, so I kind of know how it works and feels, so I don't mind it. But my current actual topwater rod, I run an 8-2-to-1 instead, but the Gomex's handle really helps make it feel more comfortable to go at that speed, or just a bigger handle with good bearings in general. This just happens to be the one that I think actually looks pretty badass. This whole combo, I've shown you before, but it's the Fate 7/9 crankbait rod, moderate, with the Calcutta 100, like I said, 20-year-old reel, and then that Gomex's handle, just the whole black and silver thing. You're going to see this rod a lot in this recap because I use it for several things. Hardly ever actually big crankbaits, which is kind of funny. But there you go. That was bite number, what, 156? Let's go to 157. So 157, I was playing around with the donkey rig, which is a double fluke rig. And I'm actually out here on the lake after a 3-day fishing trip with my buddy Michael, and I don't have any of the donkey rig stuff on me, but why don't you watch the bite, and then I'll try to explain to you what I was doing and what I was using afterwards. So funny, I tied. There we go. That's a little better. That's a bass. It's at least a 3 or 4, probably 3.5. Come out of there. Just trying to get in the trolling motor. There you go. Double fluke rig worked.
Yeah, got him.
That's a 3. Well, bite 157, donkey rig. It's 2 flukes. I think I did grab the hooks. Let me grab a little box with all my baits. Yeah. So they were just 2 standard flukes. There's this company called Gorilla Baits. They changed their name. I'll have a link below. And you basically run 1 hook in the back, which I would use this heavier Berkley EWG Fusion 19 Superline hook. And then a hook in the front, which I just used the same hook, but a little smaller, so it's a little bit lighter. And then you tie a leader to a swivel, and before you tie the swivel to your main line, you put another swivel on a short leader with this hook above that. There's a bunch of videos out there on how to fish it, or how to rig it actually, and fish it. Tactical Bassin had the one that I saw that I used their info on. Like I said, I just put a heavier hook on the back so that that's the one that is leading the cast. It actually casts really well. It's a really fun rig when they're feeding on bait fish. I was throwing that on a really old 6.6 All-Star rod, medium action fast, with a bait rise reel, which I have on my crankbait setup, which is like this cheap JDM Shimano reel. It's basically the old Casitas, but with magnetic cast control. I'll talk about that soon when we get to jerkbaits. But I like that 6.6 for making it walk, and they just get all erratic. I should fish it more. It's a really cool rig. Like I said, the donkey rig. Thought I'd throw that in there since I was playing around with it. Cool stuff. And it's weedless, basically. I mean, it has a couple of swivels, so if you're in like hydrilla, it might get built up on the swivel, but mostly weedless. So we're moving on. I'm trying to knock these out for you guys since I'm so late in getting this out, but like I said I would get them, so here we are. Number 258 buzzbait bite on Orange Lake on Sunset. You gotta love it when they're on a buzzbait bait. But why don't you watch the bite video and then I'll tell you how I was doing it. There. There we go. That was awesome. Just come right up and grab it. Sweet. A little 2-pounder, pound and a half, something like that. Still. There we go. That's another good one. That is the way to end the day. Buzzbait bite. Whew. Yep. There's your big sister. There we go. That's a better fish. Or is he just all in weeds? I think it's both. Now it's the same, just all in weeds. Back to back though. Sorry. Gotta love it when you get more than one bass in a row, especially on a buzzbait. I was throwing this buzzbait right here. I actually have a whole buzzbait hack video that tells you basically what I did. This is not my favorite buzzbait frame, basically. I actually just bought some of those, but I had run out. That's usually the Buddha Bait Toad Runner. It just comes out of the package pretty good, and all I do is switch out to these quad clear blade. I like the quad blades because they can allow you to go slower, but they still work fast. So they're a little more versatile than like a double prop or even the triple. And I actually just got the clear because sometimes in super clear water, I think, not having the blade visible, just churning helps. And when you buy a pack, it's like $5 and you get like 10 of these blades. So I've only ever bought 2 packs and I still haven't gotten through all the blades. I mean, they last a long time. And as you saw, like bass will come out of their way to get a buzzbait when they're looking for that surface bite. It's that steady churn. And I have that rigged with a live target skip shad, which is not designed for this. And I have it rigged kind of, what is that, horizontal, flat. And when it comes through the water with this bait, this buzzbait body and even the Buddha baits one, it kind of, instead of straight, it just kind of rocks like this. So that bait's going flashing a little. And if they're eating shad, they just destroy it. Only a little trick I'll give you, like I said, I have a whole video on rigging this and how I hacked video on buzzbaits and how I did this, is that these baits are not plastisol, they're silicone. So I use a little bit of silicone sealant when I'm rigging these up the night before I go fishing, and put it on and then slide it on, and it helps keep the bait on there longer. If it gets ripped off while I'm fishing, I'll just put another one on with super glue, because they won't stay on without it. Just a flaw in the hack, I guess. Using something in a way it wasn't designed for, but it works. This little buzzbait is awesome. I might actually tie it on and cast it over here before I leave. And that's on my do everything medium heavy setup. I guess now it's the old SLX rod. They just came out with a new one, but SLX combo, 8-2-1, the standard SLX reel, 30-pound braid on the 7.2 medium heavy SLX, medium heavy fast SLX rod. I've caught so many fish on this. This is what I caught my PB on, the 12-pounder, the Big Mama. I just caught a 9-pounder on a buzzbait on this. It has caught me more fish than any other setup I have. I like Shimano's, well, there's a thing about rod ratings, all right? Different companies have different ratings. Like I have Dobbins rods, I have 13 fishing rods, and I have Shimano. Those are my major 3 that I have. Shimano is always going to be on the fast side for what they say, which means it's a little stiffer. Dobbins is always going to be on the soft side, which means it's a little bit more moderate. So you can kind of pick and choose. So even this is like a medium heavy, and it is, to my mind, a true medium heavy. My Dobbins medium heavy feels more like a medium plus. It's not quite a medium heavy because it has more of a give, so I'll use that for treble hook baits. And I'll use this for a lot of Texas rig, a lot of single, like I got a swim jig, a lot of single hook baits, spinner baits, buzz baits, especially buzz baits with the 8-2-1 is the one I like to throw. Works really well. One of my most versatile setups. You'll be seeing it again in many more videos. SLX. And it's about $200 for the combo, so pretty affordable as far as like real bass fishing equipment goes. Well, like I said, this recap is a little late, so here we are on bite number 259, and I'm talking about my last summer punching bite, because our summer lasts till October, late October, and this video is late October. Pretty much right after this video, our first cold front started coming through. I mean, you can argue that we don't have a real winter, but I just call the winters when we get days like today, like bluebird sky, cooler nights. We do actually get really cold here in Gainesville, but this was the last summer bite. The time change hadn't happened. Why don't you watch it punching on Orange Lake? There we go. Punching bass. There's bass back. Punching on Orange Lake is always a good bet. There's so much cover, so much different kinds of cover, and the bass can be anywhere. And actually in the winter and in our summer, which is probably, if you took those 2 seasons, that's like 80% of Florida weather, mats are where our fish like to be. In the summer, it's because it's cooler. In the winter, because it's warmer. And in general, it's just a really good place for them to ambush and feed. So punching is like a way of life for me around here. So the first real dedicated combo I ever bought was a punching setup. I've talked about this exact setup many times before. Actually, I think the first recap of 2022 was almost all about it because I was on a huge punching and pitching bite. I do have a different setup for jigs, similar rod, but this is my punching setup, and it's the last generation of the Corrado rod. I want to try the new one, but this one is still doing great. It's a 7.7 heavy fast. It's, what is it, 7.7 heavy fast action. This is what they call their braid punching and pitching rod. They have a 7.6 medium heavy, which is their fluoro flipping and pitching rod. I run SLX 70 MGL with 65 pound straight braid, and I was fishing a kinky beaver, which I do a lot. It's just my go-to punching bait with about a 1 ounce weight. This is three-quarter ounce on right now, but I was flipping lighter grass the other day, had this on. I always flip with an EWG Fusion 19 Superline hook and either 4 or 5/0 depending on the bait. The kinky beaver can use either. 5/0 sits a little further back, so it gets slightly better hookup, but I mean, I've caught plenty of fish with the 4/0 as well. I really like the Fusion 19 Superline hook. It's actually beefier than the Gamakatsu Jungle hook because I bought that in the past when I couldn't find the Fusion hook. Whole supply chain issues the last few years. But yeah, if you live in Florida, I don't know how you fish without a punching setup. I have actually 2 friends I fished with recently who apparently don't fish the kind of cover I do, and they have this exact rod, but they didn't bring it to come fishing with me. But that's a whole nother story. You'll see that in a bite of the day review coming up. I don't know, hopefully not in 6 months, but soon. So that's it. That's my punching, last of the summer punching bass on Orange Lake. This is my setup. You'll see it again. As always, it's been the same setup for me for over a year now, maybe 2 years I've had that. The thing is, the SLX MGL 70 isn't a punching reel. It's for like jerk baits and lighter baits. But if you watch a lot of these videos or you follow pros, you'll see that a lot of people will run those kind of reels as long as they're not a BFS reel, all because of the drag at that point. A heavier drag with a small spool, because you're never doing long casts, and a smaller spool has less centrifugal force momentum when you pitch it, so that when the weight lands, you get less of a flare up from the spool. I have a total breakdown of that in my recap of January and February of 2022. I go deep into my punching setup and flipping setup. I interchange that term because I grew up flipping, and punching was just, we got better weights and better gear, but it was still the same fishing I was doing. I could just get into a little bit deeper stuff. All right. Okay, next up is number 260. Wow, getting through these things. I'm trying to get through these things. It's a swim bait fish, Flow Glide. I got on this crazy bite on Rainbow River. I believe we're going to talk more about it in this recap and the next one, because I'm breaking these all up. I did a little modification that I saw Milliken do on his channel. Why don't you watch the bite and talk more about it? There we go. That's a good one. Oh, that's a real good one. Whew. Yeah, that's what I just thought. Then my last one. So yes, the Flow Glide by 6 cents. Here it is. Let me pull it out of the pile of baits. I had 2 of them, down to 1. I lost one somehow. Cast it. It was a weird. It broke off. I don't remember how it did. It was a weird one, but here it is. It's a pretty small glide bait, but it is perfect gizzard shad size, and you can see the gap is wider. If you've ever seen this bait before you widen it, it's not that wide, and it gives it a much more dramatic action. You can do a lot more with it when you do that. I got a couple of the Bait Sanity tungsten strips on there to make this sink a little bit faster, because I do fish it a lot on Rainbow River in current, and it just need a little stabilization. I switch out the hooks to the Owner ST35s. They are a 90-degree, or they have a flat side to their barbs, so that when it sits up against the bait, it sits up tighter. I run that in the front, and then I run the Gamakatsu G Finesse in the back. I fish this bait a lot in Rainbow. That's why I can get away with like not the beefy hooks. You can see where you're throwing, and I've caught up to 8-pounders on this, and they haven't come close to bending out the hooks. This was a part of a crazy shad bite that I got on Rainbow. I'd gone through a bit of a drought of catching nice fish. I've been catching fish, and if you follow me, you know I like to catch big fish. And it'd been a couple months since I caught a good one. And I decided to go down to Rainbow and give it a shot. It had started to have cold fronts come through, and Rainbow River is spring fed, so a little bit cold front proof, not 100%. I was actually right behind a dude fishing shiners on his paddleboard. And I know he keeps all his fish, so it always bothers me to see him out there, because I mean, he'll keep as many fish as he catches. But I saw him go right through this section, and I went right behind him, but that fish just kind of came out of the water as I was going down the bank. Made it kind of like cast here motion in my mind, and 2 cranks in, that 6-pounder nailed it. There's actually a couple right behind me on their dock. They got to watch the whole thing. So yes, it's the 6 cents Flow Glide shad modified, and I was throwing that on my same crankbait setup that you saw me talk about with the Whopper Plopper. This bait is about as big as I'll go as far as swim bait or glide baits on this rod, and I won't throw this bait on this rod in lakes with heavy cover. I'll throw it on my Dobbins 806 Fury actual swim bait setup, just to get that little extra power. But when I'm on like Rainbow River or somewhere like that, and I want to have several different glides available, that can foot the bill for this glide, so that I can have like the Explorer Gill or Sneaky Pete on my 806. I'll have this on my Fate Black crankbait 7.9. I mean, it is a big crankbait rod, and that's about the same size hook a big crankbait would have. I just don't trust it if I think I might hook into a double digit. I'd rather have the 806. But with a crankbait, it'd probably be fine. It'd probably even be fine with this bait. I just, have a little more confidence in the heavier rod. So yeah, there's actually, I'll put a link to Milliken's video on how he modified it. It's pretty easy. I put up some photos of what it looks like before and after. I took some. But yeah, that was bite number 260, Flow Glide modified. They're actually super hard to get now, because once he made that video, people realized how versatile this bait is. So hopefully I won't lose this one. It's my last one. Great shad bait, and not very expensive. It's like it's between $20 and $30, which for a glide bait is cheap. All right, so yeah, that was the Flow Glide. We're gonna see it again. it's gonna come back. I'll kind of move through those, but I caught a lot of fish on that bait in like a few weeks. This is a continuation of that same day. Amazing day of swim bait slash everything fishing, but every now and then they just stop biting your bait, and that's when it's nice to have versatility. And that's one of the reasons I always keep a jerkbait rod on my boat most of the time. I say 90% of the time it's there. Even if I don't think I'm going to use it, I might. And really, a jerkbait needs its own setup. But why don't you watch this bite and we'll talk about it. There we go, that's a good fish. Look at all those fish down there. And there's shad, that's the good one though. I wish they still made this jerkbait. The jerkbait rod. So the rod in that video is not my jerkbait rod anymore. I just not upgraded. I just got a new rod, and it's almost the same rod. That was the Fate Green by 13 Fishing, and this is just the regular Fate. I just wore that rod out. I had it for so long, and it's like the blue started chipping off of it. I keep meaning to see if 13 will do something to replace it, but I hear they discontinued that rod. But the 13 green black, if you had it in 6-7 or have it medium, is an awesome jerkbait rod. Basically, I got the same thing in the regular Fate. This is 6-7 medium with my what is this? The Bait Rise again JDM reel. That is it's $60 when I got it. It might be $70 now. I don't know if they even still make them, but it's the old Casitas with a magnetic cast control instead of the centrifugal. And that was on my favorite little jerkbait, if I can find it in this box of baits I brought out to show you guys. Here it is. They don't make this one anymore either, but I still have one. The Berkeley Juke 65, I believe. The small one, 75. It's the small one. I've gone on eBay looking for these, and I can only find the bigger ones, which I have some of the bigger ones, but this little guy is amazing. And it's fun catching a 4-pounder on a medium setup. Hopefully this wind doesn't affect the recording too much. Like I said, my mic is dead. Trying this without one. Jerk baits. Keep them in your boat. I mean, it's so fun. Like that 4-pounder on this. I mean, I've caught a 9-pounder on the same setup. Trust me, it is a battle when you hook into a tank. That's when you really need the right setup. And that's when like a medium rod is key. This is not a medium moderate, not like a crankbait rod. It's a medium fast because you need that little extra crispness to get that stop when you jerk the bait. And I also run braid to monoliter. I run a 17-pound monoliter most of the time just because this is Florida. Most of my friends who fish jerkbaits elsewhere always laugh when I tell them, oh yeah, I run 30-pound braid to a 17-pound monoliter for my jerkbaits. Because usually I don't need to get them deeper than I can get it with that. Usually I'm trying to stay above cover. Every now and then I need to get them deeper, and I will go down to like a 15-pound copolymer, and that's about it. Like I have tried 12-pound, but I just don't trust it. Like even our open water isn't open. There's always something that they can get into, and I just don't trust anything lighter than 15. I don't trust fluorocarbon, period. I don't even touch it. It's not on this rod. It never will be. I mean, you can go back to some of my old videos when I still was throwing it. And it worked. It can work, but I just don't trust it. It's failed me too many times, and it costs too much money. Braid to mono leader does it for me. I haven't needed to change. Maybe if I lived in, you know, a more clear, deep water reservoir type place, I would try a fluorocarbon leader again, but I would never use it as a main line again. I can tell you that. But yes, I just got this set up maybe a month ago, the new rod. It's the same reel, 30-pound X9 braid, 17-pound Berkeley trilene leader. I run a little clip. Right now I have the owner clip on here, the Hyperwire. It's a good clip for jerk baits because it can get into the eye of some of them where the eye is buried in the bill. I take the split rings off all my jerk baits so that I can run the clip. But yes, keep a jerkbait rod on your boat because you never know. So next up is another flow glide. This was also on the same day, and I actually had several bass fighting over it. Why don't you watch the video, and then I'll tell you about the actual bite. Oh man.
Perfect.
There we go. That's awesome. Since I already broke down the gear, the bait, and everything, I'll tell you about what was happening in that particular bite. Because the other flow glide bite, the bass blew up in front of me. I threw. I just worked it at a steady pace. I got maybe 3 or 4 handle turns in and nailed it. This one, I was reeling it in, and I almost got it to the boat, and I saw several fish try to hit it. One grabbed it and came off. So I immediately threw a shorter cast and worked it a lot faster to make it seem like another, or maybe even the same fish trying to get away. And one of those 3 fish nailed it. Wasn't the biggest of the 3. I think it was the one in the middle. And by the time I got that fish off, took the picture, the other 2 were done. But sometimes when they're, especially when you can tell the bass are being aggressive toward your bait, that's really when you need to start twitching. Normally, most of my bites that aren't on the landing, which I do get a lot of bites within the first half second this thing hits the water, are at a slow, steady retrieve. No twitches, no nothing. Maybe if I can see a piece of cover, I'll twitch it, but usually that's also to get around the cover. I know that's a standard technique, you know, throw in a faster reel turn. Doesn't have, I don't say it doesn't work for me, but I don't do that and I still get bit. But when I have followers and there's more than one, that's when erratic movement is the key. It's kind of like the jerkbait. It creates a reaction bite, especially if there's competition between more than one bass. That's when you can really convert those followers into an eater. So there you go. The flow glide can be worked slow, can be worked fast, especially after that modification. And it's out of the box. It likes to be moved steady or twitch real fast. It doesn't really have anything in between. This, when it's modified, does a lot more. It has a lot more versatile action. Speaking of that versatile action, here's another flow glide. This one's totally different setup. Same river, Rainbow River. Watch it and I'll tell you how this one was different. we go. Right there. Good one. Just nailed it. Come on. I was on that shad bite. It stopped. Like, if you ever been around a shad feeding, bass feeding on schools of shad, there's like highs and lows. And I was on it. It was a lot of fun. And then it just totally died. And if you watch my videos, you know I love fishing the whole river. And I have some spots that are particularly good for glide baits or swim baits. And since I already had this tied on, I was fishing it, and out of the blue, in the eelgrass, slow steady retrieve, like I was saying, that one nailed it. Same setup, but more of my standard retrieve. It's a little different in current because you can't go quite as slow because the line is moving with the water. I never even saw that bass coming, and that's how most of my bites on the slow steady retrieve are. They just come out of nowhere and they nail it. It is a lot of fun. Flow glide on my heavy crankbait setup. All right, we're just gonna keep going then. 264 is another swim bait fish, but not the flow glide. And it was the next time I went back to Rainbow, and it was a few days later. The shad thing was still going on. The guy in the paddleboard fishing with shiners was still there, but man, I had a much better day than he did. Why don't you watch this bite? It's awesome. It is with the Mike Buka Baby Bull Shad Warrior. There you go. Check out this bite and I'll tell you all about it. So yeah, with that shad bite going on, I went home and I grabbed every shad bait I had, and I was given this by my buddy Peter a while ago, and it went in and out of my box. I caught some fish on it, but I don't know. It wasn't in my box that first time, and I put it on my rod before I went the next time, and that's what I caught that 7-pounder on. I mean, they were just destroying shad that day. I lost a much bigger fish, like maybe probably more like 30 minutes before that on the flow glide. Never even saw it. It just bulldogged me down into the 20-foot deep hole there. But I was throwing this actually on my chatterbait setup, which I had just made my chatterbait setup because I broke my 7-9 Fate crankbait rod that I've been showing you. That's actually number 2. This was number 1. And I broke maybe the first 2 guides off, so it's about 4 inches shorter. And I didn't feel like throwing it away because it was such a nice rod. So I just found a new tip that fit on the rod. And so now it's like a 7.4, 7.3 moderate action, but it's for big crankbaits. So it's a little too heavy for like, or it's a little too stiff now for really a lot of crankbaits, but it works really good as a chatterbait rod, and small swim jig rod, and apparently small swim baits, treble hook swim baits. I have that paired up with my old Corrado 100 MGL that, it's newish to me, but it's an old reel. This thing is amazing. When you cast it, it almost sounds like a, what is it? This reel is amazing. When you cast it, it almost sounds like a DC reel. It just makes this awesome sound. And it can cast super light baits. It's just a little taller than a modern reel. I mean, it's a 100, so it's got a smaller spool. And I just got used to like the SLX and all of even the smaller Corrado for walking and twitching. So this just feels awkward in my hand to try to walk a bait. It would make a great jerkbait reel, but it just feels awkward. So it casts this small stealth blade like nothing else, and it threw this little bait like nothing else. And this rod made that bite possible, or made me catch that fish. Just was moderate enough that 7-pounder couldn't shake it, but it's got enough backbone that he couldn't bulldog me into the weeds. I was running 20-pound braid to a 15-pound copolymer leader for that setup, which is not a normal setup for me, but I'm not normally trying to put every shad bait I own on the boat. That day I was, because I'd already knew that the shad bite was on, and it was still going on. This is not the last of the bite of the day from that maybe week and a half period. Just goes to show you, don't throw away your rod if you break off your tip. Sometimes you can take that rod and it just changes the action a little, and it can be good for something else. Now I got a better crankbait rod, or a better chatterbait rod, out of my broken crankbait rod. And also, older reels aren't always worth getting rid of. Sometimes they're actually better than the new ones still. Just like everyone who loves that green Corrado. It's on a lot of people's decks to this day. That Corrado, it's a Corrado. MGL 100 is a badass reel. So I left a bait out in my little recap I filmed on the dock there. This Sebile shad, topwater. I'll let you watch this bite and I'll tell you why I came back to tell you about it. There we go. Wow. That was awesome. That is a fat fish. Whew. So yes, the Sebile shad, I believe it's discontinued by Sebile. At least Gary tells me he can't get them anymore. I actually saw this in Gary's tackle box one day and just had to buy it because it looked cool. It happens to be the floating version. I think Berkeley's going to start making these. I know they're already making some of the Sebile swim baits. I guess Sebile isn't anymore. I don't really know. I know that Patrick Sebile lives in this part of Florida somewhere. and I guess has a couple new companies that he's working with. But he's a famous lure designer, and I guess his Sebile swim bait that everyone loved was amazing in spot fisheries like up in Lanier and whatnot. I've got a couple. I've caught a couple fish on them, but I don't really have a need for a sinking one, and that's the only ones I have very often, sinking treble hook swim bait. But I do have them just in case I need them. But I saw this and had to buy it, and this was during that shad bite, and they had stopped biting all my other topwaters that I normally would throw, and I did throw, they just weren't eating them. Like the gunfish, my favorite Yozuri popper, even the little tiny Sammy, small whopper ploppers. I had a bunch of shad topwaters and they just didn't want it. So I happened to pick this up and put it back in my box before I went between my 2 good shad days on Rainbow. And man, as soon as I put this on right at sunset, it was like I couldn't stop it from getting eaten. That fish you saw was the biggest one I caught that afternoon of like maybe 10 that I caught in like an hour. And this thing isn't quite a true topwater. It's kind of a jerk bait that floats. So it kind of walks and then goes underwater and it's kind of like a hard fluke almost. But it's the perfect size for the shad that were there at that time. So that's why I grabbed it and put it in my box just in case, and I'm glad I did. That bass is what you call a healthy eater. I mean, you saw when their mouths are that small to their belly here in Florida, you know he's eating well. And I mean, there were so many shad in that little lagoon that even the birds were taking breaks from eating. There were shad everywhere, and the birds would eat for a little while and then they would stop. The bass would eat for a little while and then stop. But I couldn't get him hit at topwater, so I tied this on, and it was on my same topwater combo that you've seen in a couple other bites in this recap. I just realized while I was editing this that I left this lure out, and I didn't want to leave it out, even though it's discontinued. I think it's coming back under Berkley. Hopefully they make the floating version. If they do, I'll let you know if I find one. I'm going to keep my eyes open. And if any of you find them, let me know. Or if any of you have these baits and don't want one, let me know. I'll buy one off you because I can only find the sinking or the really big ones. This one seems to be a rarity at this point. I did change out the hooks to some Gamakatsu G Finesse, which lightened the bait up, made it a little bit more consistent of a topwater. Throwing it on the mono leader helps too. But yeah, there you go. I had to stick this one back to the previous filmed part of this recap. We're up to bite number 266. And this is during that same period of the shad bite. But just because you're on a shad bite doesn't mean you don't bring other stuff. And like I said, there's that window. So I went exploring up the river and caught my first fish on my custom painted Papa Pete, or any Papa Pete, and on the setup I bought to throw baits this size. Why don't you watch the video and I'll tell you more about it.
There we go.
Yes. I've gotten into custom painting. If you know, I'm a full-time artist. If you watch my channel, you probably figured that out. And if you've been watching my channel, you probably saw my video on my Bait Sanity custom paint job I did for them in the hookup tackle. But when I was still figuring it out, I painted a Papa Pete and a Sneaky Pete, like a golden shiner, like to go fishing with Atypical Outdoors. I think I did this in a day. Well, 2 days. I had them gold, and then I finished them up in a day. Papa Pete is the biggest of the Sneaky Pete's that G-Rat puts out. Amazing glide bait, amazing in current, and it is not small. This is a big bait. It's heavier. Originally, I was throwing this on my Dobbins 806, and it just always felt sketchy. Like, just didn't feel comfortable throwing this. I never broke it off. But I didn't get a bite either, other than a pickerel or something. I got one pickerel once. These big baits aren't as versatile in terms of where I can fish them, especially here in Florida with all the heavy cover. But sometimes they'll eat it anyway. And you saw in that bite that fish ate it pretty much within a couple reel turns of it landing in the water. Actually on a spot that I did an underwater video about. How many bass are under this tree? If you go back, you can find that in my playlists. And a spot that I know holds bass that I hardly ever catch a bass off of. They just don't seem to want to eat. But when this thing landed, that 5-pounder nailed it. And like I was mentioning, that was on my new swim bait setup. And that was the first fish I ever caught on this setup that I bought originally to throw that bait and the Gen 2 Explorer and any bait that size, but for big glide baits. And it is a Dobbins bull shad rod. I know I should get a bull shad glide bait to throw on it. Just saving my pennies till I can afford one. Hint, hint. And I'm throwing that with a Corrado, my first Corrado 300, with the big Gomexus power handle. Pretty much now, if I got a swim bait rod, I put a Gomexus handle on it. It just makes the experience a lot, it just feels right, especially if with glide baits where you're using the reel as the movement to work the bait. Less so with any other bait, but a glide bait, all the motion's in the reel. Not that it really mattered with that fish because it ate it right away, but this is a step up from my normal swim bait, the 806 Fury. This is an 836 SB swim bait. 836, it's 8'3", 6 power. So this is a heavy 8'3", and this is actually the same blank as the Champion series. And it's the only rod, they don't have any other Mike Bucca rods. This is just its own rod. If you go to Dobbins' site, it's cheaper than the Champion of the same rod. Slightly different action. Actually works really well for some of my bigger soft bait beast hook, like weedless, if I run them, especially with straight braid. So if I go out, especially if I have more than one person on my boat or somebody else's boat, I can bring my 806 and this, and I can pretty much throw the gamut of swim baits. I have another swim bait, soft swim bait rod for big soft swim baits. It's a 13 Fishing Fate swim bait rod, and extra heavy with a Calcutta 250, and that is like the next step up. And with the really big, like 12-aught and bigger beast hooks, that rod really helps get that hook out of the plastic into the fish. This rod does a great job with the big glide baits, as you saw with that fish, and with the moderate sized beast hook, like up to 10-aught. Actually, the next bite of the day recap, you'll see this thing catch me a nice one. I love this setup. Like I said, those really big glide baits are more or less a niche opportunity type thing. I don't have a lot of places to throw them where I think the big fish are. Even on Rainbow River, it's hard to throw those big baits all the time, those really big baits. So I was stoked to finally get the whole package together. The custom painted bait on the new setup on my favorite river, and it was a nice fish, 5 pounds. Not huge, not record setting, but man, in that current, it was a lot of fun. And you get to watch the whole fight, which is always one of the best things about fishing on Rainbow. We're up to 267 more shad spawn or shad feeding videos from rainbow. This time though, it was that same day where I tied on every shad bait I had, and one of those, good old Spro BBZ1 floating shad. Why don't you watch the video and we'll talk about this? That was a fish. Dang. There we go. That's a good one. Awesome. Pretty good one. That is a good one. The wake bait. Good old pretty fish though. Nice way to start the day. This was on my same heavy crankbait setup, the 7.9 Fate Black with the Calcutta 100. This is the old school BBZ one. I guess now Spro has Fish Labs is their other brand, and so it's called something else, but they still make this bait, but it has 2 hooks now. The old version has 1. I have a little lead strip. This is the floating. The lead strip just makes it a slightly deeper wake bait. And also fishing on rainbow where there's current, that little extra weight stabilizes it. And it is my favorite little wake bait. I have 2. I have one in the darker shad color, and there are just times where you can't beat this little wake bait going across the top. Especially if they're eating shad of this size and you've already got them eating other stuff, sometimes they'll stop eating everything you have. You'll pick this up and you'll get that big one that's been waiting underneath all of them. And it's just such a fun bite to watch, as you saw in that video. But same setup, the Calcutta 7.9 crankbait rod. Versatile. I have a small boat, and I fish out of the roundabout and the kayak, so I don't have a lot of room to carry a lot of rods. I even have more rods than I know what to do with as it is. So it's really great when like that 7.9 crankbait rod can do so many things. It can throw my whopper plopper, or my bigger whopper ploppers. It can throw my medium small wake baits. It can throw my Magnum square bills. It can throw my actual deep diving big crankbaits like a 10 or 6 XD, which I hardly ever throw, but I do have some. And then, there's a couple other moderate, medium-sized baits with treble hooks that rod really handles well. And then the repurposed version handles even more stuff well. So there it is. Don't overlook the wake baits. This bait is awesome, even though it has a new name and maybe one more hook. I love this old Spro. I put the Gamogatsu G Finesse on this too. Most of the stuff I fish in rainbow, I put this hook on. They're just so, or the Owner ST35. They're both equally super sharp. They have that slick coating. Like if a bass just nips at it, you got them hooked. Whether they stay hooked or not, that's up to you. If you watch my videos, I have the ones that got away videos, and the heartbreak of some of the big ones is still there. But I can't complain. I do pretty well. Let's go on. Number 268, we go back to an old friend, the Yozuri Popper. It's been a while since I've talked about this bait. I've been trying some new baits so it doesn't stay on my topwater rod as much, but why don't you watch this video and then I'll tell you all about it. like 5-pounder.
Nice. Nice. Wow, that's pretty good. Yeah. That's our best fish of the day.
Open water, top water.
Yo, Zuri. Wow, look how green that is.
Yeah, I got that other big one. Same spot. I think there's some structure out there. Right. This was me out on Lake Panisofsky with my buddy Buzz practicing for my very first kayak tournament. Yes, I got a kayak through Buzz. It's a new canoe. I'll have a video about that at some point. I did the one tournament. I got 15th out of 55 and would have qualified for the Bassmaster Classic kayak tournament if I got top 5, which Buzz did, and he is going. He's representing. But before the cutoff date for kayak fishing, we went out in my boat to Lake Panisofsky. That was where the tournament was going to be. And I knew something about the lake. Buzz didn't. So we figured we'd just go and check it out. And we stumbled upon this bite. We went back to a spot that we had started at earlier in the day and didn't have much luck. And in the evening we went back and they were just exploding on shad. I had just come off that Rainbow River bite. Panisofsky drains in with Kikuchi, which is where Rainbow River ends. So I was looking for some kind of way to replicate that pattern, even though it's a lake. I'm like, shad should be on a similar time schedule. And they were. And I found the cove. We just weren't there at the right time in the morning. We went back in the evening, totally different story. And we just started going through baits. And it turned out that the Ozuri popper was the first one to strike out. And, you know, first blood was on this. And if you know me, you know I love this popper. It is my favorite popper, one of my top 3 baits that I have in general. And yeah, there was some submerged hydrilla that you can't see in the video, and I was basically throwing this around it and finally got a good one to bite, because we'd been struggling to catch a decent fish, and that was more than a decent fish. And that was on my topwater setup, which I actually haven't talked about today. It's kind of surprising. It's buried. Hold on. My topwater setup hasn't changed since the last recap. So it's been about a year since I've had this set up the way I have it. It is Shimano SLX XT, the 8.2-to-1 on a Dobbins Fury medium heavy 30-pound braid to 17-pound monoliter with a clip. Either this is the decoy clip I have on here now, just because I couldn't get the hyperwire ones. I switched between the two, and they're actual clips, not the like slide-on clips that I prefer to use, but I can't use with topwater because a lot of poppers and whatnot, you can't get those slide-on clips into that eye of the hook. So I just stay with the clip-on ones. I like these decoys. They're just a little bigger. They're not any heavier or thicker gauge. They're just a little taller, I guess. So I feel like they're not as good for topwater. I just haven't made an order for more of those under hyperwire ones. I'm down to my last one, and it's on my jerkbait rod. If you watch my channel before, you know that I run a rod that is for, they don't say it's for topwater or treble hooks at all. It's for worm and jig fishing. They're medium heavy, but as I was saying earlier, this is a Dobbins. It's a lot more moderate of a medium heavy. You can see it's bending down past the first guide or last guide, depending on which direction you're talking about. And I run this rod specifically to be able to pop these size treble hooks out of lily pads and grass. That way I don't blow out my spots. I can throw my topwater in areas that I normally would have to throw a frog. It's just the way I like to fish. The mono leader helps a lot in giving me a little cushion and helps the bait float, helps keep the line out of the hooks. Mono leader, braid to mono leader is the only way I'd fish a topwater. It's just so much better. And 6.6 because I like to be able to walk the bait, and with my topwater, like I said, I throw this in places I shouldn't. So the 6.6 is way more accurate than a 7-foot. And it's just what I like. It just feels right to throw baits on this rod. Got the gunfish on there, which is probably the only other topwater I like more than the Ozuri popper is this one. There it is. That was bite number 268. We're almost to the end of this recap. And then pretty much tomorrow I'm going to film the next recap. These will probably come out about a week apart, maybe more or less, you know. I'm just hoping this works. All right, we got 2 left. This next bite was immediately after that Ozuri popper bite. We caught a couple fish. They wised up. They stopped eating the Ozuri popper. Bass are weird that way. They can figure things out. You'll catch 1 or 2 fish on a bait, and they'll stop eating it, and you just make a slight change to, in this case, I made the change to this little Sammy 65. Why don't you watch the video, and I'll tell you more about it. There we go. There we go. That's a little better than the last one. Yeah, that's a bass. On the tiny 68 Sammy, or 65 or whatever it is. Look at that little on the paws. I mean, he better. Look how many shad they've been freaking eating. This little Sammy 65 is a sneaky little bait. Oop. In this video, I hadn't yet bought my bait finesse setup, which I do now have. A video on that's coming soon. So this on my topwater setup is actually kind of difficult to throw. I can only throw it with the wind or in no wind, but I can throw it, and I did, and it got the biggest fish of the day. It was this little 65 Sammy in this American shad color. The Sammy is a famous walking bait, but not a lot of people know about the tiny Sammy. And when they're eating shad of this size, this is probably one of the most deadly baits I own topwater-wise, which a lot of times when I'm eating shad this size, they're eating topwater. The other is the Whopper Plopper 60, which we'll get into in the next recap. Awesome little bait, throwing on the same topwater setup. I switched out the hooks to the G Finesse hooks, just so that if they even touch it, it's hooked. Especially those big fish, you want to get as many hooks in them as you can. And when the bait's this small, it's almost harder to hook them. Like there's like a medium, big baits, it's hard to keep the hooks in them. The medium-sized baits, that's usually what they eat. You can get a lot of hooks in them. The little baits, sometimes it's hard to get a hook in. So I put on the sharpest, highest quality hooks I can, which for this bait are the G Finesse trebles. Same topwater setup. Other than that, I was doing exactly the same thing. They had just switched off the popper and onto the Sammy. This little bait is a little secret. I know you can hear it, and it walks great. Check it out, the Sammy 60. So the last bite of the day in this October-November recap that I'm doing in, what is this, March, is a good old spinnerbait bite. Out with my buddy Josh. And I was just telling him how where we were off of Lake Santa Fe is a good spinnerbait bite, so I put one on. Actually, one of these, the Z-Man Blades. Why don't you watch it, and I'll tell you more about it. That's a spinnerbait. That's a good one. Right off the sunken boat.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I knew as soon as I set the hook it was a better one. That's a good Thanksgiving Day bass.
How big do you think?
Just saying. The spinnerbait in that video is actually the same Z-Man spinnerbait, just the finesse version. This is the regular size of the blades in the bluegill color. I'm a big fan of bluegill or black spinnerbaits. I hardly ever throw a shad color spinnerbait. I do, but it is at least 3/4 of the time I'm throwing a bluegill patterned one. It's actually funny. I heard them messing with JT Kenny on the MLF when they were when they were fishing in Florida, and they asked him if he even owns a white and chartreuse spinnerbait anymore, and he's like, nope, now that I'm not on tour. He actually has an awesome Nichols color that's a black bladed bluegill spinnerbait. It's called the best color ever. I had one. I need to get more of those. Awesome spinnerbait too. But my favorite spinnerbait for the money is got to be the Z-Man Blades. It's got the hardened wire that's actually dark. I don't know if it makes a difference. I like it more than the bright silver wire. Double willow leaf. This one's a gold silver. That was a double gold in that one. Throwing that on my medium heavy setup that you saw earlier. The buzzbait was on. Same thing, 30-pound braid to 17-pound monoliter. The one thing I'll tell you guys that I didn't mention in the buzzbait video is that with my spinnerbaits and my buzzbaits and a few other baits, I still tie an improved clinch knot over the Palomar knot with my monoliter, just because it points the line forward and the tag end isn't sticking out forward like it is in a Palomar. And I find it just makes the line not fold back on the bait quite as much. I don't feel like it's the best knot. You have to tie it just enough. You have to wet it and pull it. Palomar is way more reliable, but it has held up. I just caught like a 9-pounder on a buzzbait with an improved clinch knot, so it does work. Actually, on this rod and reel, that's coming soon. But yes, 8-2-1 reel is considered fast for a spinnerbait, but it's easier for me to slow down than to speed up. You'll hear the opposite from other anglers. You'll hear the same from other anglers. It all depends on your personal preference. I'm used to a 7-2 or especially an 8-2-1 at this point. So slowing down, I think, is easier than speeding up. It's harder to get something to go really fast than it is for me to go slow. Just mechanical advantage, physics. But it's all personal preference. But yes, most of my spinnerbaits are thrown on just a regular medium heavy 7-2 fast action with a 17-pound monoliter, 30-pound braid. One other tip, sharpen your hooks on your spinnerbaits and your buzzbaits. It's not like a crankbait where you can change out your hooks, but these hooks do get dull and you do need to check them. Like this one, I could sharpen that one. So I keep a sharpener on me, and I always check my spinnerbaits periodically I'll check them and just sharpen all of them, but if I'm throwing one that day, I'll definitely feel it. And if it's dull, I might not tie it on, or I'll bust out my sharpener if that's the only spinnerbait that I feel like I want to throw. That's the deal. So carry a sharpener with you, hook sharpener. It really helps. Like I said, I'm sorry that this bite of the day recap is late. Hopefully this time it works. This is the third time I filmed it. I got another one coming soon. Hopefully I'll film it tomorrow and edit all of this, and it'll come out a week apart, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm Ted from Ted Lincoln's Fishing Life. Thanks for checking this out. I'm out.